What's up, guys? So now that we've seen the full effect of what actually Marasai is like in the current version of the game, and with the hook being quite powerful and pulling somebody really quick and stunning them for like quite a decent amount of time, the rest of the changes that I'm suggesting in this video kind of need to be amended with a little bit of a nerf. I do talk about the character getting a little bit tankier, and if that's the case, you need to do something like nerf its fire rate, or nerf that a little bit, or nerf the stun duration or the beam blade. I still think the changes are useful and should be pushed, but just want to say it would need a little bit of a nerf too. If this were to go through. What's up, guys? Marasai needs some changes, and here we're going to talk about them. So jumping right into it, I do have to say that I'm conflicted about this whole discussion. I really liked playing Marasai during the network test. I thought it was lots of fun. I got a frag out sometimes with it, but I also fundamentally don't like hook-based characters in these sorts of games. It is not as problematic in this game as it is in Overwatch with Roadhog, which I'm going to compare this a lot to because they're fundamentally very similar, and the games, of course, are just in general very, very similar, fundamentally. The reason it's not so similar is because in Gundam Evolution, things die a lot more quickly. There's a lot fewer things to protect you, essentially. There's not like a Brigitte putting armor on you. There's not a Diva to matrix you, protect you, things like that. So it's a lot more lower time to kill, faster. You see something, you click on them. If they hit you faster and harder, then you die. If you hit them faster and harder, they die. So that's a lot of how the game plays in general. So getting hooked and killed on a flank or something like that, with the Roadhog, sorry, with the Marasai flanking or something like that, isn't quite as oppressive as it is in Overwatch, and isn't really any different from getting flanked by like a Pale Rider or something like that. So it's not quite as bad, but I still have concerns about it because I honestly hate being hooked. It's particularly problematic in something like Overwatch just because the health pools are a lot different, and if you get hooked as a tank and pulled in the enemy, then you're going to get stunned up and killed. But all the HPs are standardized in this game a lot more, so it's not as different on getting hooked in something like Sazabi. So I'm not complaining too much about it, but I do have to say I'm still conflicted. Rant over. Now we're going to talk about Marasai from the perspective that it won't fundamentally get changed. So it's going to be more or less how it is, a hook-based character with some medium range damage potential. The first thing I really have to say, I do not want them to buff Marasai's damage. I just don't. I've heard it a lot. I talked about it before. Basically, I believe if they just buff the damage, it's going to turn into another damage character, essentially. It's just going to be very similar to like the 6 or 7 other ones we have that are just damage focused. And basically that means it's either going to become just outshadowed by other characters, or it's going to become too powerful. So it might be too weak and just completely forgotten about, or it might be too powerful and have a lot of issues, because it would have a lot of damage, and then it would have the double dash good mobility, high HP, a very good ultimate, which is a lot better than other damage characters, with maybe only Marasai and Barbatos having competitive ones. And I'm also specifically talking about, I meant Pale Rider, sorry, but I'm particularly talking about characters that are like medium ranged damage spam-based characters. So really only Pale Rider has a better damage ultimate in that category than Marasai would have. And the issue with all this is it would be so good, and then it would also have this utility of being able to hook higher HP targets, pull them in, and kill them. So it would just be very oppressive overall. It would basically have too much in its kit if the damage numbers were high enough. So they shouldn't do that, because it would just cause problems, and it would make the character too... It would take away what makes it special, which is essentially being very similar to what Roadhog is in Overwatch, but not as oppressive. Roadhog and Overwatch, if you guys haven't watched my Marasai guide, you should check that out as a side note. But basically what Marasai is supposed to do is be a sort of central tank, a main tank, where if enemies walk into the range of the hook, they risk dying. So they have to play around it, and they have to try and not walk into that or wait until you've used it. And by doing that, you create a lot of space in front of you. So they either have to avoid it, or if they go into it, they risk dying. So it's a unique little niche that it has that it would obviously lose if it got turned into just a standard damage character. Now, like I was saying, it's not as oppressive in this game because Marasai doesn't have 600 HP to just walk around just stomping everywhere and doing whatever it wants, which would be equivalent to about 6,000 HP in this game, which would be insane. But the goal is to keep it like that, right? And so the changes that I would really like to see is essentially a reward for hitting hooks, because I wanted to be focused on hitting the hooks, because if you're going to have it in the game, well, you might as well follow up on it, right? You already put it in, we're going to deal with it, but we need to make the best of it. So I would like to see one of two options. The first one being when you hit a hook, you get a damage reduction on yourself from damage that you take. What I notice all the time is whenever I hit a hook, I would have a hard time finishing it because I would just get killed a lot. If they had one or two enemies looking at me, I would just die. And so it was really not ideal in general. And it kind of took away a lot of the point I felt of hitting the hook because I would get punished for hitting it. And that's not fun. And if you're going to make a character that can't do that sort of thing and make them really like functionally a damage character that needs to not play hyper aggressively because they can take too much damage and die, then why even make it so complicated and give it a hook? You know? So essentially, what they need to do with it is make it so that you do get rewarded for hitting it and get the damage reduction, so that you are capable of finishing the kill. And if the enemy supports their teammate when they get hooked and start pressuring you out, then you can escape without dying. But you don't get punished for getting the hook in the first place, which is what we're trying to avoid. The second option that I would like to see, and this is one I actually like more, is instead of a damage reduction, I would just like to see a set amount of armor that you get extra. So probably something about like 500 armor. When you hit a hook, you get 500 armor and you become more tanky, and this armor stays until it's knocked down. And that way, you're essentially getting a buff in HP by hitting your hooks. So you're being rewarded for hitting the hooks, but you are also getting some of that damage reduction capability so that you don't just get blown up when you do hit a hook. There are some techniques you can use. Like I said, if you haven't seen my Marasai guide, make sure to check it out. I do talk about the lot of little tech you can use where you can dash after you hit a hook and it continues to pull them. And that's really useful, but not in all situations. If you're hooking someone around a corner or something like that, they're not going to stay hooked when you pull them. They'll get stuck in the wall and you won't get the hook if you're doing dashes. And it changes the line of sight. So you can't just rely on that, and we can't rely on that for being the reason why Marasai is okay, which is why I need some changes. Another option that I could see them doing is just adding a flat HP buff and bumping it up to like 1500 or 1400, which would be okay, and I wouldn't complain because I do like tankier characters. That's what I specialize in. It's just how I like playing the game. I like being beefier and not having to be concerned about blowing up all the time, which is ironically how Overwatch turned into for the tanks, but I like that sort of beefiness. But that is not as good as my other option because it isn't based on being rewarded for playing well. And I just thought it'd be really cool to be able to stack some of that armor. So let's just say you sneak onto the flank, you hit someone, you get a hook and you blow them up and you sneak away, wait for your hook to come back and you come in and hit another one. And at this point you have 2200 HP, so you're quite tanky. Not so tanky that it's like ridiculous and oppressive like in Overwatch with Roadhog, but just enough that you're being rewarded for what you've done, and you could like have this potential to like sneak hooks in, potentially even hit hooks just to get armor buffs, sort of thing, and break them intentionally, do sort of stuff like that. Stuff that I think would be really, really cool as a potential for the character. But just make sure with these changes, like honestly, most likely all we're going to see is just some number changes. They might not ever fully change this character, but likely they're just going to pop some numbers of differences on it. Looking for some more Gundam Evolution content? Then make sure to check out these 14 mobile suit guides I did. In them, I go over the abilities of the characters, the strengths and weaknesses, when to play them, and how to play them. I go really in depth, and I think the videos are really good, so you guys should go check them out. Thank you.